I'm going to have Laura come up and go over the spreadsheet that EGFR Resistors clinical website has.
That's the clicker, okay.
Okay. Can you, how do I project onto the,
Can we
there we go.
switch to this podium?
is that good?
It's plugged in.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go, but
Okay,
it's
yeah.
too.
It's kind of small, but it's okay, okay.
I can make it bigger. Oh, this is,
It's Excel.
So while they're working on that, I just want to say that the clinicaltrials.gov website is sort of the place where we send everyone to go to. I don't know if any of you have jumped on it. It's incredibly difficult to navigate. As a provider, I can't stand it. So there's, I was talking with Laura, and I was like, I'm not a huge fan of clinicaltrials.gov, but Longevity has a great, on their website, they have a very easy way to find out if you're eligible, find out the clinical trials. And then Laura told me, which I wasn't aware of, is that EGFR Resistors has a spreadsheet of another way to access clinical trials. So Laura's going to go over that with all of us.
Okay, so a while ago, a caregiver contacted me. Her mother since has died, but she said, you know, I want to attempt to do a list of all the clinical trials that, you know, are available out there. And I said, really? And she said, yeah. So she started compiling different, you know, trials. She went to clinicaltrials.gov, and so together we kind of got this going, and I put it into a spreadsheet. It's not, it's an Excel spreadsheet, so it's not, you know, highly sophisticated. However, it's very useful if you know Excel, because it's basically sortable by mutation. So at the bottom, if you're familiar with Excel, there are different tabs at the bottom. And so we have a tab for people that have EGFR common or uncommon mutations. We have another one for exon 19, L858R with C797X, T790M. We have another one for exon 20. We have another one for anybody who gets a MET mutation, another one for HER2, another one for no resistance mechanisms, or HER3. And we also have, if you keep going through here, we have one for disease, leptomeningeal disease, or brain mets. And we have another one for small cell lung cancer transformation with concurrent TP53. So depending on, you know, let's just take the uncommon. I'm going to go to that one, and common. So the first column would be, you know, the NCT number. Every clinical trial has an NCT number. And then the status, which is recruiting, not recruiting, active but not recruiting. And then the next one is if it has, like some certain clinical trials have a name like Solera or Mariposa or Flora or whatever, some don't. And then who the sponsor is, in this case, Daiichi Sankyo. What phase it's in. Okay, so it's phase 1, phase 2, Dr. Carbone had talked about that, or it's expanded access in this case. What resistance mechanisms it covers, okay? And then, if you keep going, come on, okay. You have the eligibility criteria, which is what Dr. Carbone was talking about. And mostly that's a lot to list there, so usually I just have a direct link to clinicaltrials.gov, which will say what the participation criteria is and what the exclusion criteria is. So, like Dr. Carbone had mentioned, that people with active brain mets sometimes are excluded, or there are all different kinds of exclusions. And then, well, there's a short description as well of what the clinical trial is about. And then the location. So this is for the U.S. It does not mean that these trials are only in the U.S., but I had to, we had to make it manageable for us. So we just did the locations in the U.S., but they may have worldwide locations as well. So the locations are, if you hit the link here, it'll take you to the locations. And then, come on. Okay, and then the contact information is usually the same link to the locations, who to contact, concerning if you want to enroll or get more information. The study completion date, and then any updates. So I keep an eye out for any updates from World Conference of Lung Cancer or ESMO or whatever on preliminary results of these clinical trials. So I list them here so you have some more up-to-date information about what's come out on that clinical trial. So that's basically what this spreadsheet is. However, here's the thing. If you go to clinical trials, whoops. Okay, so if you want to use clinicaltrials.com, you go here and you can put other terms, like you could put EGFR, non-small cell lung cancer. You can put, as you can see here, the NCT number of the clinical trial. It'll take you directly to it. So let's just do one. I'll show you what's going on now. Because the NCI has been defunded by you-know-who, there is a, oh, that's interesting. Did they take that away? So right now, oh, very interesting. They had a caveat on every single page here claiming that, that this information was not up to date. Well, they changed it recently. Because, we heard from the UK that one, was it Mythic Therapeutics or whatever, the patients were called by their doctors and told that it had been defunded, and they were whatever. I think maybe they were able to get it through compassionate use or whatever. But some of these trials are don't have enough money to sustain themselves, which is pretty scary. So that's pretty much my my presentation, quick and easy. So this is here. It's if you go to in our Facebook group, our patient Facebook group, it's in the featured area. You might have to scroll down a bit, but there's the link to this spreadsheet. It's updated. I try and update it as regular as possible. If there's anybody interested in helping me, because I have to basically go through every single NCT number and the spreadsheets and plug it in to see, well, is it still recruiting? Is it not recruiting? Whatever. I would be most appreciative to, work with somebody. The other thing is, if you find that there's a trial after Tagrisso that's not on this clinical spreadsheet, and people have, emailed me or whatever, please let me know and I'll add it to the spreadsheet. Okay, and you can use it with your doctor. You can, just for your own information, so that when you go to the doctor, you can have a conversation about the different trials that you know exist and what they think is best for you. And so I'm hoping it's it's a real helpful tool.
Thank you, Laura.
Much
Easier than clinicaltrials.gov.
And if you have any questions, please come to me or Mike Troy, my partner in crime, and we can answer any questions for you.
So maybe I could give one clarification here. So clinical trials are not just for people who've got no good options or are progressing on a particular therapy. The clinical trials are even for brand newly diagnosed patients. So if you run across a person who asks your advice on what to do as a newly diagnosed patient, you shouldn't just say, well, you take Tagrisso and then worry about trials later. Investigating trials up front is a good idea.
Yeah, but this, just to clarify, this particular spreadsheet, because we're EGFR resistors, we had to limit it to something, is for after, it's not for frontline treatments, it's for after. So, yes, but there are clinical trials for frontline treatments.
So Mike's a caregiver and has had experience with the spreadsheet, and I just was wondering if you could share your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, first I just want to thank Laura. It's just, the spreadsheet is obviously a starting place. It's not perfect, but it's basically a one-woman show. So thank you, Laura, for putting this together.
When Annabelle talked about joys, it's one of my joys. It really is. I feel like I'm not a victim. This is what I'm gonna use my anger and my fear and my anxiety towards. And I'm so happy when I'm doing this stuff, when I'm compiling the newsletter. So that's joy for me.
Yeah. No, thank you. No, I think you're like all your contributions to the resistors, I think it's good that we take a minute to appreciate that. So kind of with reference to what Annabelle was saying about your journey, and although we might, whether we're patients or caregivers, family members, unwilling sort of participants in this journey, you kind of, the way is not always clear, and you kind of have to navigate it, both obviously with your doctor, but also with the community. And the clinical trial spreadsheet is a good place to start, I think. Just in terms of exploring things, discussing it with other members of the resistors on the Facebook group, it's a helpful resource.
Thank you, Mike. So Dr. Carbone brought up a lot of points about barriers and misconceptions with clinical trials. And before we move on to Hannah and Kristen and the patient and caregiver perspective, I just thought, Laura, and thank you for joining us last minute as well, we could sort of banter back and forth about barriers and misconceptions that we see in our practice. And also, you have done some research with clinical trials, and I was wondering if you would mind discussing that as well.
Sure, absolutely. So I think when people participate in clinical trials, it can come up at various points, as Dr. Carbone was saying, but often it is after kind of standard of care therapy, and there are some real challenges that patients face as they go through clinical trials. Talk about uncertainty. I mean, this is one of the most uncertain spaces that people can be in. You don't know necessarily if the treatment is going to work. You don't know what the side effects are going to be, and there is some inability to discuss those things. And moreover, patients can be a little bit lost because of the transition from the team that they're so close to a clinical trial team. It's a new environment. We've done some descriptive research. I work with a really magnificent nurse researcher, Deb Lundquist at MGH, who's done longitudinal studies of patient experience and patient-reported outcomes during clinical trials. We found that patients experience a lot of what we call time toxicity on clinical trials. Patients spend a lot, and their families spend a lot of time in the healthcare system when they're on a clinical trial. Often are there for long days, having their blood tested at various points. And they need support. So I think this is an area that there's increasing recognition about the support that patients need when they make this transition from standard care to a clinical trial. And we're trying to think about what kind of supportive care might be appropriate or possible, and kind of just make sure that needs are assessed, because it can be kind of just a new world. And the clinical trials teams are always fantastic. Often there's more resources there than people even realize. At our clinical trial center, there's a case manager who's quite active, and sometimes people are coming from far and they need lodging, or they're going through this and there are so many more expenses than you realize, even if the drug is free, and kind of getting financial support is something that comes up. So one of the cool studies that I think our group just did that should be coming out soon, from my mentee, Mary Boulanger, who some of you know from the National Lung Cancer Roundtable, that was looking at hope, actually, and hope among people doing clinical trials. And clinical trials is an area, talk about uncertainty, but also talk about hope. I think hope and uncertainty are two sides of the same coin. If you don't know what's gonna happen, it could be anything. It could be not what you want, but it also could be something amazing. So people are often very hopeful, I think have to be when you embark on a clinical trial. And I think there's been a lot of worry that people are not having a full perception of what the goal of their therapy might be when they embark on a clinical trial, and worry. And I think that this, as Dr. Carbone said, is shifting as we have more rational drug design, and the selection of drugs is more appropriate. And you can have an inkling or a sense, or more than an inkling, because of a mutation match, that something has a potential of being helpful, but there's still so much uncertainty. But I think as clinicians, we often worry that people have a perception that something is more guaranteed to be helpful for them, and worry about that holding up the ability to have conversations about the future. And in this cool study by Mary, we've found that people can have a lot of hope, as you would expect, but also have the ability to have awareness about their cancer and how things might change, and have conversations about the future. So just, we talk about having prognostic awareness or having prognostic conversations with your team. And I think that both of those things can happen at the same time, which I think is really valuable, because often, given that they happen after standard of care, it can come at a juncture where people's health changes, either during the trial if the trial doesn't work, or shortly after the trial. And so one of the things I worry about as a clinician is people not necessarily preparing for the future and kind of spending time in ways that feel valuable to them, getting back to that time toxicity piece of spending more than a fifth of your days in the clinical trial suite. There may be different decisions that people make based on, knowledge and awareness. And what was cool about Mary's study is that we can have all those conversations in a really upfront way, and we can still have hope.
Thanks, Laura. You mentioned confusion with clinical trials and when patients are enrolling onto them, and I really feel like that falls back on us. The consents are long, they're confusing, and we as providers really need to do a better job at explaining this to you in layman's terms, what exactly you'll be getting, what exactly it entails. Usually you're getting a lot more scans, and it's a lot more frequent visits, and we need to be upfront and let you know all of this. I'm fortunate I'm sure you do also, we have research nurses who we work with who I completely rely on my research nurse to go through all the nitty-gritty details. But if you don't understand something on the consent or about the trial, definitely ask. No question's ever dumb. I'm a teacher, and no question is ever silly. Other sort of myths and Laura and Dr. Carbone touched on that I hear often, or, am I going to be a guinea pig? When I enroll into the clinical trial, what if I don't want to be on it anymore? Am I stuck on it? No, absolutely not. You can leave a clinical trial whenever you want. Will my insurance cover it? Yes, usually insurance does, but you do need to check, because some patients do get standard of care on a clinical trial, and they are responsible for their clinic visits and other miscellaneous, even parking, which can really add up, especially if you're driving into a city and parking. So anything else, Dr. Carbone, that you want to add?
Just a couple things. One is that you don't necessarily transfer your care to another person when you enroll on a clinical trial. In our clinic, if I enroll my patient on a clinical trial, I'm still their doctor, and I follow that patient. But there's an additional team member that's called the clinical trial research coordinator. And something that patients often don't realize is they actually get more attention and more careful follow-up on a clinical trial than they would have off the trial, because this research coordinator is watching every number that comes.
And they usually have their cell phone, direct line.
and they really are on top of things. And we have, just in our thoracic clinic, we have 6 or 7 research coordinators, and they become your trial buddy, so to speak, where if you have questions, they're the first point of contact. So it's not like we're shifting you off to some other team. Sometimes with phase 1 trials that does happen just because of the specialized care needed. But in general, in most academic situations, you retain your doctor and you just gain a team member.
Absolutely, great point. They at Penn, we all become sub-PIs on every single clinical trial in thoracic oncology, so that we can see our patients and follow them, and they don't have to go to someone else, which is really nice. No. So I'm going to pass it over to the caregiver perspective. I have Kristen and Hannah here with us, and they have very unique experiences with Kristen with her late husband Dave, and Hannah with her husband Mike on EGFR clinical trials. And so I'm going to, let me see who's up first. I'm not very good with this, by the way, if you saw me yesterday.
I'm worse.
Looks like you're up first.
Yeah, and my hands are full. I've got my
Okay.
emotional support iPad here.
Use whatever you have to use.
And I'm using notes, actually, but I needed my emotional support. It's been a while before I stood in front of my giant class, and I can't grade you. So here we are. So I put words on this slide so I didn't have to say them. I think it gives a good snapshot of us and where we come from and came from. My husband was the engineer. He was a fix-it guy. He could fix anything. He had so many hobbies and so many interests, one of which was rowing, as you see, and one of which was woodworking. And if you look closely at that center photo, you see that that is a piece of walnut that has a curve in it. That represented a new skill he acquired in order to make a sculptural piece, which you see in the bottom center photograph, and many of you know who that doctor is. It's Alicia Sequist. I see some smiles because we love her, and she's at Mass General. The piece, which if you look closely, represents spheres on each shelf. The curve is it's starting to bend the shelf, and then it goes through. Unsurprisingly, he named it Breakthrough, so that is a name that resonates with us. He also took his doctor on a rowing lesson. Somehow he managed to get a rowing lesson set up on the Charles River. That is not easy. You don't just take your boat and plop it in. So he did get that done, and I was on the chase boat with my camera, of course, taking pictures, one of which was that one. His incidental diagnosis happened really only because he had, as you see, no risk factors that we knew of at the time. Now I have a few questions. He was 59. The kids were out of the house. They were all settled and productive adults, and we were going to go on a trip to a river cruise in Europe. Had it all set up. We'd bought insurance only because each of us had a very old parent, and who knows, right? And he went to our longtime internal medicine guy just because he had the cough, the bronchitis hadn't really resolved, that he always had, never really developed either, but he got that every spring. And the season was early, so he was rowing 8 miles a day on the Connecticut River. We lived in Connecticut at that time, but he, hadn't got up to speed yet because the erg doesn't do the same thing all winter. He wasn't conditioned yet. So just because of the trip, he gets not only the Z-Pack for whatever, but let's do a chest x-ray. And all I can say is it was one hell of a mess. There was something there, couldn't be lung cancer, although of course the surgeon who eventually, 1 week later, did his biopsy, have to rule out cancer, but we had everything from something he picked up on the river to sarcoidosis to TB because, no history. And as the surgeon said when he went in for that consult, you don't look sick, just like that, and he didn't. So anyway, 1 week later, when we were supposed to be leaving for Paris, we got a stage 4 adenocarcinoma diagnosis, and talk about a shock. I kind of realized when my call didn't come in the waiting room, everybody else's loved ones were getting their calls, I got no call, no call, no call. And then the doc shows up outside the glass windows, and oh shit. I know I can say that, Annabelle, thanks to you. And I appreciate that, anyway. And I go out terrified, and he tells me, it's cancer. And I just write down in shaking hands, adeno something, and whatever style it was. And then inexplicably, I give this classic surgeon guy a hug. And I go upstairs, and I say, no, you tell him. And I go upstairs to wait for him. So anyway, you know this story, right? We were lucky. And if we can advance the slide to more pictures, thank you. So here's some more photos. We were lucky. We lived in Connecticut. There were cancer centers available. The one thing I trained in physiology, gave to this whole process, never told Alicia Sequist or Roy Herbst, the thing they didn't know. I said, let's go to an NCI center right away. And He chose Yale and Dr. Roy Herbst. What a choice. How lucky were we? And we went to see him, and he said, I think you're going to have a mutation. Probably shouldn't say that, but I think you are. And meantime, I forgot to mention how lucky we were also in that the Hartford community oncologist we were sent to knew exactly what to do back in 2012. And I learned after that, oh my, they didn't then, and they still don't. So that was a piece of luck too. And then we waited the 2 weeks, and it was on May 8th, 2012, that he got diagnosed with cancer. And so it was around Memorial Day when we finally got the results from the testing, EGFR positive, yay. And it was Memorial Day weekend, and Dr. Roy was on his way to ASCO, and we could wait till next week. Oh, no, we couldn't. When Dave couldn't get it into our hometown pharmacy, he had it switched over to the Yale pharmacy, whatever that was, and down to New Haven we go. And I remember him taking that pill in the parking lot, and off we went. So Dave had a 7-year trajectory starting back in 2012. I'm the history, people. Hannah is the current person. I'm the history. So back then, off we go. He focused on living well, and you see some examples of that here. He focused on some advocacy, not a lot, but he liked to write. We'd moved to a condo near the UConn campus where I taught, and he got himself into a creative writing class. He said, I'm old, I can take a class at UConn. What should I take? And I said, well, genetics, molecular biology, you're an engineer, you can do all that. You took my organic chemistry book in college, and you got the same mark I did the night before the exam, and I studied that damn thing all the time. So you can do it. No, my daughter says, the writer in the family, she says, take a creative writing class. And doesn't he get into the class of Dr. Regina Barreca, who was a British what was she? Some kind of literature and women's studies specialist. And she also wrote popular books, got some crap from academia for that, all jealous. She was a hoot, and they resonated. And she said, I already got an old person in my class. I'll give you an independent study. And in there, how did you do that? So he did some writing, and he got some of it published by one of Boston's 2 NPR stations, WBUR. They were doing a series called This Moment in Cancer, and that was published in 2016, so in 2015. He's seeing people like, anybody from Boston? Meghna Chakrabarty. Oh, thank you. She's a big deal. And she got some stuff out of him in that interview that I hadn't known. He wrote articles. There's one of them right there. Notably, one of them was about staying awake, alert, and yapping at the poor doctor during a needle biopsy. Will you stop? I got to put the needle in there now. So can't breathe. And that was what he did, and family. We were blessed that my eldest daughter's wife brought in a 5-year-old child, blessed because that gave Dave a big kid, grandkid, to take camping, to teach about power tools, you see here. He got to meet 2 of our babies, who are now 9. You see him with 2 of them right there in the center top. And you see all of us, one of our Thanksgivings. We did blow out Thanksgivings. And you see him with his doctor, as we said before. Let's see. So he had the first progression in summer of 13, so about 14 months later. We watched and waited. He got into the BMI checkpoint inhibitor trial. I think it was for the one that turned into Opdivo. And right before he was supposed to start, Dr. Roy came to us and said, anecdotal stories that this isn't working for EGFR patients. We know that now. So he skipped that trial, fortunately. Another piece of luck. And he said, I'm sending you up to my friend Alicia. And so up we go to Mass General because they had the targeted therapy trials. And she was the PI, and she and Dr. Yanni were working together, so Dana-Farber and Mass General, part of the same consortium. She had the Clovis ruxolitinib trial. So opening is coming soon in 2014. We waited for that. January, his first brain mets. They were gamma knifed at Yale, and then on to this trial for the Co-1686 trial. Well, we start on it, lots of adverse effects, persistent hyperglycemia. My state of Connecticut health people for years after said, did he do his diabetes training? No, he doesn't have diabetes. He had hyperglycemia from the metformin they had to prescribe because of that side effect. He had prolonged QT interval, and to Dr. Carbone's point, when you do have a trial, I don't want to forget to mention, you know, you have the first day, the day when you take the drug, and then we had to stay overnight to have checkups all weekend. So Friday, trial, dose, go, and trial checkup, go get your checkup after you started that first day. And you don't have the research nurse, you have regular oncology NPs. That QT interval, Dave was an athlete. He had a slow heart rate anyway. So it would be just a tad up. Called the research nurse. She was a cowboy. She said, tell him to run down the hall. No, says the NP, the normal oncology, not trial NP. So he did the run down the hall later on his own, but, you know, we'd have to delay treatment for a few days because of that. So that was silly. But hearts are scary, so understandable. And anyway, he had some big progression in the summer of 2014. And so what are we going to do? We're going to get off of this. And he gets off of it, and by this time, the competing trial, what I forgot to say was that rosletinib targeted the T790 mutation, which was his resistance mutation. So he goes on to, he gets accepted along with 5 other MGH patients who had had the same thing happen, the failure of the Clovis trial. They were admitted to the AstraZeneca trial for osimertinib. And so, okay, we'll do that. And he was all signed up, all the clearance was done, the washout period was done, he had done all his labs. We were still waiting on that brain MRI because Yale was still doing those. Don't do that. One place for everything. And it was the weekend, we were on our way up to Cape Cod for the Labor Day weekend 2014, and Leisha called while we were in the car, and she said, problem, there's a lot of brain mets. Could you get me my water? Thank you. Emotional support. And you too, thank you. You're the best, thank you. So, what to do? I have seen Alicia Sequist uncertain once in our course, our years with her, and this was the time. She said, I am torn. Standard of care was chemo and whole brain radiation. He did not want that, and it was different back then. Or what did Dr. Carbone feel like an experiment? Because why would it work? Was my thought. I'm a biologist. It's the same receptor as targeting. But Dave was an adventurer, and yes, let's do it. So we signed up after a lot of talk over that weekend, and the week after was day 1, and the next slide, Vicki shows me, thanks to my anxiety, I took pictures. And I took pictures starting at 7 a.m. with his blood draw through that whole 13-hour day. I got in everybody's way taking pictures. Dr. Leisha was getting an award for longevity. They had a recording team. They were a videographer. They finally hauled me out because I was in their way all the time. But they gave me some pictures too. And you see here, the mood was scared and hopeful and celebratory. It was like we were starting on an adventure. He gets a hug from his doctor. He gets a checkup from the NP. And then in the center, you see him getting his first dose, and you see the nurse checking the clock to note the exact time. And we started that long, long day, which included, let me see where I am here, PK pharmacokinetic blood draws way too often. Lots and lots and lots of blood. EKGs, other kinds of checkups, and in between, we'd take a walk up to the garden on the rooftop. We took a walk on the esplanade. We even got into those chairs once. That was hard to do. So we did things, and then we went back to the room and waited for the next checkup. And at the end of the day, we had become buddies with the nurses who had spent most of their time with the day. You see, it's dark outside. The tall nurse and I were even exchanging mother-in-law stories. I may pay for that one day. I'm a mother-in-law 3 times over. And how we love them. And that was it. So what happened is, I have a graph I'm not showing you, but it showed the path of those 6 people allowed to try the AZ trial after failure of, not them, of the Clovis trial. And every single one of them had improvement. And Dave, and this was going 20 months out, Leisha published it 2 years later. And the 3, Dave, one of them, of the 6 who had brain mets, they were gone. That was practice changing. That was, my understanding is that was one of the first demonstrations that crossed the blood-brain barrier. I don't know if this is true, but I am guessing it may be because they let them on with the brain mets. Oh, I don't know what the requirements were before that. I think that was Aura. I have no idea. I get the trial names mixed up. And then after that, he had 2 years of stable lung on osimertinib. And then he did have progression in his lungs, but the osimertinib protected his brain for the rest of his life, basically. And he went on to the standard chemos after that, because that's what was left in 2015. And I look now, please remember, I'm history. I look now, I do quite a bit of grant review, and I try not to let my biology brain pretend I understand anything. And I do what I'm supposed to do, impact, but I think a lot about impact, and oh man, I understand enough to know that I see some really exciting stuff here. New treatments, not everything another blocker that you worry about resistance with. Some of them aimed at treating resistance before it emerges. That's exciting. New approaches to screening. I got kids. We have relatives. EGFR, let's get them screened. And I have such hope for all of us. So that's my story of hope. I want to thank everybody here for all your support. I love this community, and that's one of the reasons I'm still here 6 years out.
Kristen, you are not just history, you are beautiful history. You did a great job. All right, Hannah.
Hi.
All right.
My name is Hannah Johnson. I'm based here in Chicago. When I'm not being a caregiver, I'm the CEO of a fertility startup. And interestingly, fertility and oncology have a lot of crossover between both staff and patients in terms of their experience. So that's been an interesting thing to be on this side now, having heard that my whole career. But this is my husband, Mike. And on his 41st birthday last December, he had a seizure at work. I thought he probably stood up a little bit too fast and passed out when I got the call that he was being sent to the ER. And so I hopped in the car, headed to Northwestern. We didn't even know which ER he was going to because his HR director isn't based in Chicago. And poor woman was so nervous when she called me. And I got to the ER, and he was pretty bloodied up. He had fallen and hit his desk on the way down. And I knew immediately he had had a seizure. It was pretty clear. Was very out of it. Knew who I was, but wasn't surprised that I showed up, which was a surprise in and of itself. And they were, quickly identified on a CT that he had a mass in his brain. And we didn't even have his CT back from his chest when he went into surgery to have that removed. And the wonderful Dr. Amy Heimberger at Northwestern, she kind of gave me a heads up. She thought it was probably a glioblastoma or metastatic melanoma. My mother's first husband died from metastatic melanoma, so I was really hoping it wasn't that. And I was really hoping it wasn't a glioblastoma, because as far as I knew, there wasn't a lot of progress on that cancer. So he went into surgery, and Dr. Heimberger came out 90 minutes later, which was very scary, because it was either going to be really good news or really bad news. It was kind of both, but the good news was she got it out, and it was clean and clear, did a wonderful job removing it, and while she was in the OR, his CT came back, and she knew immediately that it was stage 4 lung cancer. We are so lucky that we are here in Chicago, and we are at the with the Northwestern team. They've taken really good care of him. He presented with mets to, of course, his brain, his lymph nodes, his liver, his peritoneum, And we were able to get in with the Northwestern Thoracic Oncology team very quickly, thanks to the fact that my husband is a very beloved youth hockey coach here on the North Shore of Chicago. And the head of thoracic oncology, her nurse practitioner, is a hockey mom, and she overheard this story at the rink the day after my husband came home from his surgery and said, wait a minute, what did you say? There's a hockey coach with lung cancer? She got us in, we got sequenced, and on Christmas Eve, we got the exciting news that he was an EGFR patient, exon 19. We decided at the time, because of his overall very good health, completely asymptomatic prior to his seizure, that we were going to go on OC alone. And it was a big conversation of whether or not we would start, the standard of care with chemo or just do OC alone. And we decided to go with OC alone. And because of that, we talked through the different clinical trial options that were available at Northwestern, and there was a study looking at OC alone versus OC plus bevacizumab, which is a VEGF inhibitor. And we figured at this point, if he was only going to do the OC alone, it's a wonderful option, because he's either going to get randomized to the OC alone or the OC plus the Bev. He did get randomized to the study arm. It's not a blinded study, so we knew that he was in the study arm. And what he does is he takes his OC every day, and then he goes and does a infusion every 3 weeks. In the end of August of this year, so about 9 months in, he had a complete metabolic response on his PET scan, which was a really exciting, very exciting day when we got that news. It was over Labor Day weekend. We can go to the next slide. Those are our 2 girls. We have an 8-year-old, Charlie, and our 4-year-old, Willa. That was us in Ireland for spring break this year. So we are definitely still living as much as we can, living big. Because of his complete metabolic response, he was an excellent candidate for consolidative surgery or radiation. And so we explored both. Radiation oncology said, no way, his primary tumor is so inactive, we're going to save radiation for the future. And the surgery team said, hell yeah, let's go. He's an excellent candidate for a segmentectomy. He doesn't have to have a lobectomy. It's going to minimally affect his lung function, if even noticeable. We went in for I got my slides in late, and I was like, well, it's good that they were in late because things changed. On Wednesday, we went in for his what we assumed would be his last study visit, because consolidative therapy would make him exit the study. And unfortunately, it looks like he has progression in his peritoneum. So he will be having a diagnostic laparoscopy tomorrow with Dr. Kim, who was here yesterday. And if it is progression, which I think it is progression, then he will exit the study anyway, and he will move on to a double dose of OC, and then he'll start the 2 chemos. Obviously, incredibly disappointing, but I'm super thankful that we had 10 months where he lived very normally. You would never know. He's one of those. Still coaches hockey, coached the team last year to a championship. We're very proud of that. He's not here today because he's in Michigan coaching a hockey tournament. And we don't know what's going to happen next, but we don't think that he's resistant to the OC yet. It's just that the peritoneum is a tricky spot. It's a great spot for the cancer to hide and evade treatment. So we'll see if that double dose of OC and then adding in the chemo will be helpful to control that spot. And I, of course, cornered Dr. Kim yesterday and said, would you still consider doing the segmentectomy? And he said, absolutely. Let's see how he does in controlling that spot. I started my career as a clinical research coordinator, so this is something I'm really passionate about, of course, on the fertility side, but I encourage everyone here to really think creatively and think outside the box. And some of the things that I would say, having been in this trial, first of all, I am the 100% decision maker in our care team, for between Mike and me. So Mike does whatever I say. I'm a full power of attorney, and they were like, you sure, Mike? You want to do like full living? And he said, 100%. I don't do any of that. And that's what I do as a caregiver. My degree is in biochemistry and molecular biology, so it's a natural fit that I do the research, I make the decisions, and I take that burden off of him. It's also a really big responsibility, because I think if I told him to stand upside down, for 45 minutes every day, he would. But I think what I've learned from this experience being in a trial, one, you do get a lot of extra attention. And my husband is a pip. Like, he has been unbelievable throughout this experience. So the team really likes him because he's not a pissant. He comes in there with a smile on his face every time, and he loves going to the infusion center, and he's friends with everybody. But you do get extra attention, and you do get extra surveillance, which I'm really thankful for. You know, he gets scanned every 8 weeks for the study, both brain MRI and his CTs, and so I think it's been very helpful for us to be able to have that extra surveillance. I think it, contributed to us seeing this very tiny potential progression and having an opportunity to figure out what's going on there. But one of the things I think that people are scared of is this going to be additive or not? And I think that's a really important thing to weigh. And everybody here is in a different situation. Obviously, my husband's very young. We have 2 young children. So we're on the very aggressive side. We will do anything. And part of doing anything, and Mike and I have talked about this, I'm super thankful for Mike. If you guys don't know Mike, you should meet Mike. He is so passionate about this, and we all have a role to play. I can't do as much research as other people can because I have these 2 little minions, but I think what people are also afraid of is whether it's going to be additive to them or not. And then also there's guilt around leaving a trial. My husband had a lot of guilt around leaving his trial, knowing that he had gone into this trial to really contribute to the body of evidence that was important to both of us. We know that every decision we make now is going to help someone down the line. No matter what happens to him, he can be contributing in that way. And I, on the other hand, said, I do not care. I will rip that primary tumor out myself if I have to. If that's an option, let's go. And I think that's one piece of advice that I would give to people in considering trials is that it's okay to be selfish. It's okay. The trials are here to advance the medicine, but you are you, and this is your life and your family. And if you need to exit a trial to try something new, if you want to do something aggressive and think outside the box, I encourage you to do that. I think sometimes when people get into trials, they feel very responsible for being one of those data points and not wanting to mess up the data by exiting or doing different things. And I really appreciate that. Having been a clinical research coordinator, I hated it when my data got messed up by people. But that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to live and to find what works for you and to explore different options. And I think that coming out of this weekend, what I'm really inspired by is the creative thinking of different people that I've met. And this is so incredibly overwhelming. It's insane. It's deeply unfair to every single person here. And we all want our loved ones or ourselves, if you're the patient, to live as long and full as possible. But I do think that we have to think creatively right now because we don't have time. We never have time. Just like my patients don't have time to wait because they might age out of being able to be pregnant, we all don't have time either. So I think, keep looking, keep exploring. If you're with a team that isn't supportive of you exploring clinical trials and sites, get the hell out of there. Leave. My team immediately started talking through trials, and they said, if we're not a site, we'll send you wherever you need to go. If you need to go to MSK, if you need to go to MD, we'll figure it out. And that's the kind of collaborative conversations you should be having from the get-go. Do I qualify? The conversation, if you don't know anything about clinical trials and you don't have the kind of background that I'm very fortunate to have, I feel very blessed to be able to interpret this data. I know a lot of you are so overwhelmed. It's so overwhelming. There's so much information, and it's hard to know if it applies to you. Just start with that question. Are there any clinical trials that I qualify for? And see what the answer there is. And if you don't feel like the answer is strong and supportive, then move on, find somebody else. And maybe it's not a new doctor because maybe you don't have access to a new doctor. That's not easy, but maybe it's looking at the spreadsheet. Maybe it's finding people in this room and talking to them and figuring it out, because there are inclusion and exclusion criteria, of course, and they're important components of doing good clinical research, but there can be exceptions at times. There can be creative thinking around how to get you into a trial, and talking to your team about that and exploring those options is really important. My husband did not do a clinical trial as a second-line therapy. He's a first-line. So like Dr. Carbone said, it's not just about second-line, and obviously everyone in here is already in it, but you're all going to become advocates and friends and peers to others down the line, and so you can encourage other people when they join this horrible club to ask these questions, because there are so many studies out there, and it's the only way that we're all going to be sitting here, years from now saying, we did it, we found the thing. I do believe it's out there. I don't know, none of us know how long that's going to take. And there's so many interesting and beautiful stories in this room that are incredibly inspiring. What I know is that my husband and I have committed to making sure he's part of that till the end. And hopefully that end is really long from now. But he is young and healthy, and we want to use him to help the next generation, just like your husband did. That's what we do. So I hope I'm here at the 10th Patient and Caregiver Summit with him, and then maybe the 20th. And who knows? I have big goals for him and for our family, like we all do. I've heard a lot of beautiful stories this weekend of of grief and hopes and dreams that are uncertain, and we're all living that journey together. But there are studies out there, and they can be a pain in the ass. My husband goes to his appointments, and it's 5-6 hours, every time he goes, but it's worth it because it's going to help move us forward. So thank you all for being here. Thank you so much to EGFR Resistors, also to the Young Lung Cancer Initiative. It's a little weird being one of the youngest people in the room, but there is another group that's for that, and they've provided me a lot of hope. And just keep talking to each other. If I hadn't talked to Mike, I know 5,000 more new things because I talked to one person. So just keep talking.
Thank you all. I hope that you.
Hannah and Kristen, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going
Go
to
ahead, go
thank
ahead.
them for being so resilient, and thank you for sharing your story. It was amazing.
Yeah, thank you all. I think this is a fantastic session. Well, I'm biased, but I hope it was really helpful. And please reach out to all of us. We're here to help you, and we really appreciate your being here.
I just want to add one more thing about clinical trials, is that there is anyone who needs to travel, like Hannah said, get out, go, like our panel do the same thing. We send you out. If you need to travel and fly somewhere, there is a group called Angel Flight, and I think there's a few, but they will transport you to your clinical trial. They're pilots who need to get hours for their license, and they donate their time and their money towards flying you. So just keep that in mind if you do need to go somewhere.
So we have 10 minutes of our scheduled time. Are there questions
good.
from the audience?
I felt a little rushed. Any questions?
Oh, thanks. Just first of all, thank you for sharing your story. I know all of us are very thankful. I know personally I'm very thankful every day that I take Tagrisso, because I do think back about all the people that probably participated in that. Their story continues not just in that pill bottle, but in the digestive tract of everybody who is taking it. So thanks. Two kind of questions. I guess the question about ownership. Who technically owns or controls clinical trial? Is it pharmaceutical companies? Is it the institutions? And should we be concerned about their financial stability? Does that kind of weigh in at all?
So there's an incredible variety of different trials. There's the pure pharmaceutical trials that are looking at a combination of A and B versus B and C or something, and it's thought of and funded by the pharmaceutical companies. And obviously they design them so that they may have new markets and new registrations. But all of these trials are reviewed for ethics by independent review panels, and I really honestly trust that process. It's quite rigorous to make sure that it's not just profit driven, that it's really could benefit patients. But on the other end of the spectrum, we have what's called investigator-initiated trials, where scientists in the laboratory will come up with an idea, and we figure out how to test that in people, and we figure out how to fund it, sometimes from foundations, sometimes from the federal government. And it's really independent of a profit, for-profit motive. So it's perfectly legitimate for you to ask who's funding this trial and what, whose idea it was. But in academics, we really try to initiate the trials and not just follow what pharma has to say. And cooperative groups are a good mechanism for that. I don't know, we didn't even talk about cooperative groups here, but there are NCI-funded research groups that do clinical trials with ideas that come from clinicians and scientists to test, and their mission is to test things that pharma companies have no incentive to test. So I think it's an important mechanism, but unfortunately is under fire right now. But anyway, there's a huge range of the funding and the ways to implement trials.
Okay, and just the second question I had, quackery, is that just a thing that is in the movies, or is that something that, you know, if I walked into my doctor's office, he said, hey, here's some tree bark and some sea foam, I probably would question that.
Well, you'd be surprised what what we see in clinic. I've had patients walk in and say, hey doc, I've been seeing this naturalist and I'm taking a few things, and they lift up like a grocery shopping bag full of 14 different bottles and pills, and some of them in Chinese, and we do have databases of, you know, where we can check on some of these things. I would say the most often they're pretty benign, but there are specific Chinese herbs that directly interfere with things, and especially when you're on a first-line targeted therapy like osimertinib, you do not want to mess with that drug, which is a really good drug, does what it's supposed to do, and really helps people. And sometimes these weird supplements can interfere with the metabolism of the drug or cause side effects. So especially then, tell your doctor if you want to take one of these things. And sometimes it's okay, and sometimes it's not, and sometimes we can help you. Because I had one patient that had this bottle of stuff that she was paying $50 a bottle for, and it was all in Chinese, so you couldn't tell what was in it. And so I have a colleague who's Chinese, and so he read the label and he said, oh, it's salt water.
However, I just want to say this, however, there are certain oncology naturopaths, and I'm not, you know, saying you need to go to one, however, that are FABNO, F-A-B-N-O certified. And of course you have to, you know, do your due diligence, but there are some people, like I went to Mayo Clinic in Phoenix and I saw the integrative doctor there, and she recommended that I see this guy, you know, Phoenix, whatever. She said he's talked to them about stuff and they respect him, and that, you know, his patients do seem to do better. So, you know, sometimes you want to keep an open mind, sometimes not. I know
Always keep an open mind.
I know my doctors, you know, don't want to know about it, and that's okay.
They need to know about it.
Well, I know, but I do tell them all the stuff I take, but they don't want to, you know.
But don't do anything that will mess with osimertinib.
However, my oncology radiologist,
Don't mess with anything.
my oncology radiologist just does connect with him, and, you know, has a good relationship, and so that's my due diligence. You know.
I would say the biggest problem we have in clinic right now is ivermectin.
Oh, well, no, I'm not talking about that. No.
This is and you know, dog dewormer
Yeah.
that you can buy at Tractor Supply Company. And it is amazing the misinformation on the internet about this drug that, you know, you can buy along with your horse feed, you know, in Tractor Supply, and they think that it's a miracle drug for all types of cancers. And I even had a patient who had a bulky chest disease, not a driver mutant patient, but high PD-L1, excellent candidate for immunotherapy. I tried to convince her immunotherapy was natural, and it was using your own body, and she absolutely refused to listen, and she heard online that ivermectin was a cure for everything.
That's
But
why you have to do your due diligence.
So I said, at least come back in 2 or 3 months and let me do another scan. And she said, fine. Of course, her cancer had tripled in size when she came back. We gave her 2 rounds of pembrolizumab, and it had disappeared. So, you know, be careful what you read online. Go to a certified person. Be smart about things.
And do your due diligence.
Right.
Thank you.
2 quick questions. These are easy questions. I came into this with the idea that it was hard to get into trials, that it's very exclusive, almost kind of insider thing to get into trials, but when I listen to you, it sounds like you're trying to recruit people into trials. So I was curious whether it's harder to get in or harder to find participants, one, and two, is there any typical length of how long a trial runs? Is it a year or 5 years or 6 months?
Huge variability. So, trials have to have some uniformity in terms of eligibility criteria. And sometimes it may feel like it's hard to get into a trial. But really, a big problem is slow accrual to these trials. Testing these new drugs takes years and years. And a big problem is access in terms of location, physical access. First of all, some doctors never want to refer, if they're in a private clinic, they'll never refer to an academic medical center for fear that they'll lose the patient and the billing revenue from that patient. That's a problem. Trials sometimes are small and only open at a couple of institutions, and you may not be able to, if you live in Saudi Daisy, Tennessee, you may not be able to fly to UCSF to get on a trial, so that's a problem. But they really shouldn't be considered to be only for, elites or whatever. And you should investigate trials, and if your doctor doesn't want you to or doesn't want to consider a trial at another institution, you should find a new doctor.
I guess we have one more question and then we have to
You wrap up?
yeah, but one more question. Thank you. I know I speak for everyone in the audience. Before I ask my question, I just want to thank the organizers of this conference and all of the panelists. It is really clear, seeing the speakers and the panelists, the compassion and dedication that all of you have for us. So thank you so much. So my question, there's two, of course. I'm wondering if any of the panelists or anyone in the audience have any information on the use of a fast mimicking diet around chemo treatment. It's something that I've been dabbling in on my own, but I have no idea if there's really any effectiveness of that.
After ivermectin, I think diet is the next most common
I'm
question.
sure. I'm sure. My doctor said it probably won't hurt, and that's pretty much all she could tell me. But if there is anything I can do that improves my treatment, I want to. So that's the first question, if you've ever heard of this and what you think. And then the second question is, I actually there is some current trials happening with fast mimicking diets, and I tried to get a protocol related to, specific to lung cancer treatment, and I couldn't access the protocol of an ongoing trial.
We have trials like that in my place.
Is there a way to get protocols for ongoing trials when they're closed to new participants?
Or do you want me to start?
So I was just going to say, I'm not familiar with the diet. First of all, thank you for your kind words. It was incredibly nice to hear. I'm not familiar with the diet, but I do tell my patients if they want to change their diet to just, sometimes people go from a very regular diet to a dramatic diet. They cut all sugars and all meats and everything out. And I just caution them that, with the weight loss and being able to maintain a healthy diet, and when people ask me what kind of diet they should be on, which is a very common question at the first visit, and I got this from the doctor that I collaborate with. He just said, a heart-healthy diet is a cancer-healthy diet. But if you would like to do a Mediterranean diet or the Atkins diet, things like that, I just caution about dramatic shifts because we do see a lot of weight loss, and us, we don't like weight loss.
Well, it's true. I think one of the main goals is not losing weight, because when you start rapidly losing weight, your body is what's called catabolic, and it's not focusing on fighting the cancer. It's focusing on, trying to survive, basically. And so, the fast mimicking diet is actually probably a real thing, a ketogenic diet, sometimes called. And we actually have a trial on that at my institution. And so there's some rationale to testing dietary changes, but then there's also
when I was-
extremeness. Just one more thing. I
Yeah, go
had
ahead.
I had one patient who would take 20 pounds of carrots and juice them every day.
Did she turn orange?
And she literally turned orange. And, you know, unlike our president does the same thing. Except his is painted on, I think.
I mean, when I was initially diagnosed, I read the whole thing about, oh, don't do sugar, don't do this. And I went on a keto diet for 2 years. It's not sustainable. It really is. It's so hard, and it really deprives you of joy of eating and stuff like that. It makes you a little bit crazy. But there are things that, like oncology naturopaths can do, to help your body recover from the nasty treatments, the side effects, and things like that. So, and to build up your immune system, which are not harmful. And so, yeah, go ahead. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out too, like exercise, the hazard ratio on exercise, it's like 0.5. So, I mean, simple things like a healthy diet and getting exercise, I mean, that's a
And that can just be walking for 20 minutes a day. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be marathon running.
And the last thing is like, I think some of the discussion up here can get a little spooky with like all the unknowns. I'm sure Dr. Carbone will back me up on this. There are a lot of really, really active agents in clinic, and just simple thing is like MTAP deletion, like new stuff coming. 20 to 25% of you will have an MTAP deletion, which is going to be targetable. So,
PRMT5 inhibitors.
yeah, exactly. So, you don't have to resort to some crazy off-the-wall thing. Like there's
Science drives progress.
All right, I hate
And chocolate.
Thank you.
And
Just said
humor
I'm never
and
giving up
resilience.
chocolate. Never, ever, ever. No, so thank you to this wonderful panel. It is, of course, there is never enough time, and nobody wants to stop the discussion, the questions, but we know you all have flights to catch, or a lot of you do. So thank you, all of you, for a wonderful, wonderful panel. And you can go. Yeah. Go ahead. And especially Hannah and Chris, thank you for sharing your experience. And, just a quick note as they're walking off, there's other form of advocacy that's called, a research advocate, and that's actually most of what I do is go to scientific conferences and speak on behalf of the community. Dr. Carbone talked about cooperative groups. I'm an advocate on a cooperative group and provide input into the science, into the research, talk about the lived experience. And science was my worst subject. Math was my second. But, it's our lifeline. It's our future. And so we don't need to know the science. We need to know what it means personally in people, the clinical impact. And so if anyone's ever interested in giving their input, they listen. You don't just get a seat at the table. You have a voice. I've seen things change. And to Mike's point, I just have to say there are a lot of exciting things happening. Last week was the EGFR Resistors Research Summit, 15 early career investigators presenting, ideas, new thoughts, and with some preliminary data. It's amazing what's out there. It's a lot. It's a lot to unpack. And yes, funding is tight and tough right now, but we can work on that as well.